Hi, I'm Alexis,
And I'm Kim.
and this is the Whatcha Watchin podcast. And this time we are talking about Fast 10. Now,
Yes,
Kim and
we are.
we have never seen a Fast and the Furious movie prior to this. Kim has seen Hobbs and Shaw, but I am completely new to the Fast franchise, and we are just doing this through pop culture osmosis at this point. So
Yes.
we're going to get into what we thought of Fast 10, which is technically the 11th one if you count Hobbs and Shaw, but I think a lot of people don't. I don't know. Anyway, Kim, what did you think of Fast 10?
I had far more fun with this than I was, to be honest, expecting to. But I have to say, a lot of that, Jason Momoa. Jason Momoa, Jason Momoa. And I think he's going to come up a few times probably throughout this episode because you have more of a Jason Momoa expertise than I do. But I don't know what he was smoking, what direction he was receiving, what was going on there. But all I know is I want it because he finds something so weird, wonderful, and Joker like in that character. The plane that he reaches, and some of the supporting performances as well. I believe some of those supporting characters and the cameos, they're in the same movie and they seem to know the assignment. They get the assignment and they're having a heck of a lot of fun with it. So they were the peak there when this movie did not take itself seriously. When it becomes Fast and the Furious, as it becomes kind of culturally osmosis to me now, I had a blast with it. Then the other side, Vin Diesel and the family, when the movie tries to get a little more serious, it slows down. You start hearing the script sounding a little chat GPT like. It's not as strong there. But I'd say 75% of it was an absolute blast. Gravity needs to not mean anything. Death needs to not mean anything. And these actors need to be aware of what movie they're in. And when that happens, this movie was flawless, I thought.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on Jason Momoa. It was funny to me because like I feel like Jason Momoa is just becoming a cartoon character at this point.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And here it really, really
Mm,
works because he seems to be the only person who is really embracing the ridiculousness of this. And he's leaning so hard into it that it makes it so much more fun. And then when you
yep.
contrast that with like the sort of dour kind of quality that Vin is doing, it's so strange because like Vin is like he mumbles anyway. He's already
Mm-hmm.
kind of got that gravelly voice. Like, but I feel like in this, there was times where I'm like, is he awake? Is he like, what is going on? Versus Jason, who's giving us this like really eccentric. I said in my review, like it's Jack Nicholson's Joker meets Heath Ledger's Joker meets Jack Sparrow meets Beetlejuice. Like he's doing this
Yes.
insanely over the top performance. And it just wakes the audience up. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
funny because you'd get these scenes with Vin where it's very like it's about my family and it's like it was the same kind of like trite cliche dialogue. And then the second Jason came on screen, the entire audience in our screening was just like like everybody just like sat up and they were ready for it because Jason was just going to be bringing the fun. Like that's Momoa is here to entertain you and he gets that. And I don't know why, like, it feels like there's not a cohesion of that idea among the cast, especially with Vin. It's like, you understand what these movies are at this point. Why are you acting like you're in this big, heavy, dramatic thing? This isn't like, The Departed. You're in Fast and Furious 10. Like, what are you doing, man?
It's cutting between Vin and Jason Momoa in like Princess Leia space buns painting the toenails of dead men and
Yes,
having absolute glee while doing that.
absolutely.
It's such a leap. And it does lend itself to a little inconsistency, but yet Vin seemed to be, I think we had said to somebody, he seemed to want his own superhero movie by this point. I mean, he's already Groot, but he's just standing around being contemplative.
I wish there was a scene where there was like a black tie affair, but he shows up in like a tuxedo, but with no sleeves. I just kept thinking about different scenarios in which he could appear sleeveless because that seems to be his entire thing.
I want that in the next film. I want a tuxedo with no sleeves. That must happen now.
Yeah, I think like the cast is so enormous that in a way it was like, I mean, you know, these are like very one-dimensional characters. I don't think anybody's saying like, oh, these characters have depth, but it was funny to me how even when they're one-dimensional characters, you're still kind of like, there's way too many people in this cast. Like there, it seemed like a lot of side plots, a lot of things that were just taking away from the action. The entire like Tej Roman Ramsey storyline, I could feel the audience getting bored with that. And, you know, Tyrese's dad jokes that weren't landing and things like that. It was like, I could feel people starting to just be sort of like, oh, okay, when's the next action sequence? Or like, when does Momoa come back on screen? There were like these weird little lulls. And then like John Cena, sort of a side plot, but he's so entertaining and he's really like his comedic timing is incredible. Yep. So I feel like people were less bored during that, but even that was like, okay, so how many 15,000 side plots are we doing here? And then reveals of reveals. And this, like, we're going to see the same scene multiple times, Rashomon style, but it's like, but not. And it was messy in a way that I think maybe the other ones aren't. But for me, I was like, I don't care. This is a big dumb action movie about cars driving and explosions. So I don't care if it's messy.
I think the standouts here, you've got Momoa, Cena, who brings something completely, which it sounds like based on what I've only heard, he's doing something completely different than he did in his previous film. And he's better that way. He is better when he can be funny. He is not, to me, his strength is not being dour and serious. Totally. Charlize was having a lot of fun in a way she usually doesn't.
True.
And Brie Larson, I thought as well. But then this was having to, what surprised me was the amount of time. I mean, you had these great performances, but then jumping back and forth between a script that was desperately trying to inject 10 movies of exposition into it. To fill in the gaps for, you know, jerks like myself, you know, who have not seen these films and do not know. But I came out of this basically, so-and-so is so-and-so's daughter. So-and-so is, you know, here's the relationships, here's the vibe. But then that leads to a lot of clunky sequence. Poor Alan Ritchson in there gets most of that. You lean to me at one point and go, God, was this speech written by ChatGPT? And
there was a period of time where I was like, I am not convinced that this man is not an entirely AI creation. Like, it's like his look is very like generic action guy. His dialogue is very like generic. And I just got to the point where I was like, what if we find out later that this was the first like fully AI character in a movie? Because does this man even exist?
He struggles so mightily, and I mean, I've only seen him popping up relatively recently, so he's probably still a baby. And thinking about it after the fact, I drew the comparison to, what's her name, Cassie, the actress who played Cassie, Catherine Newton in Ant-Man. You're given a lot of clunky, challenging dialogue to a performer who's just coming out. It's like, I know the exposition needs to be given, but try and lay it out a little smoother.
Yeah. It's funny, like, I feel like clunky dialogue is basically like the trademark of this at this point. And then there was these weird like exposition moments, which I appreciated as someone who hasn't seen it, but I was also like, this is so funny and how it's executed. There was a point where like there was like an entire room set up, and I can't remember if it was like Momoa or somebody was in this room, and it was basically just like playing the previous Fast movies on all these screens. And I love when they do that in movies where they're like, yeah, and here's, you know, some footage we got off of the, you know, the closed circuit cameras, and it's just like the previous movie or something. Yeah. Like, and you're like, why are there cuts? Why are there different shots? What, like, Arlo camera is recording these, like, cinematography style, like, widescreen sweeping shots with like crane movements and stuff. And
This is
so
the
I just love that.
B-roll from 2 films before.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're like, what? How is this happening? And then I love also whenever they have to do like, and this is this person, and it's just like clearly the actor's headshot or something. I started laughing at one point. They have Momoa's Baywatch Hawaii like headshot in there. And as someone who has like seen Momoa's like entire career unfold, it was hilarious to me to be able to be like, oh, that's the Baywatch Hawaii era. Oh, that's from North Shore. Oh, that's from blah blah blah. Like, because I was like, oh my god, they were like, and here's these pictures of Dante from when he was younger, and I was like, oh yeah, from Baywatch Hawaii. Like, it just added this extra layer of insanity to me that I was like, I fully appreciate this. Like, we're not even attempting at this point. We're just going, here's footage of him on the red carpet from like Conan the Barbarian. And like, yeah, that's the footage. That's Dante. That's what he was doing before. It's like, okay.
There are elements of this movie that doesn't seem to quite understand, at least in our screening, because the film doesn't seem to 100% realize what it is now. Momoa's clearly understanding that this is a big, fun, big, dumb action film. But then just as quickly, it'll shift back to Vin and the family. And it's almost to the point of parody with that. You see in the Saturday Night Live parodies and the sketch parodies of this, what do they always hit on? The family. Vin puffing out his chest and family. And you could even see that in our screening. Every time, there were multiple periods where they would do the whole the serious family talks, and people would snicker. It's been around so long. I think I looked it up. The first film was 2001-ish. This franchise has been around for 20 years. And yeah, it's become the parody of this. And I don't think the film 100% understood that.
Yeah, I feel like they could have leaned into that more in a way. And I think that's where like Momoa was basically kind of doing that. I mean, even the dialogue, he has, very like, cliche dialogue as well, but he's doing it in a way where he gets it. Like, he gets what the point of this is and that it's ridiculous and fun. I think that entire like, well, Vin's got family. At one point they said something about like, he doesn't have family, he's got a cult with cars or whatever. And I thought that was great. And then there was one where he's like, you got no honor because you got no family. And I'm like, oh my God, like people were laughing because it's like, it's so ridiculous, but it's like, then let me laugh. Let's embrace that. Let me enjoy how ridiculous it is. And let's lean into that. And it was like, his superpower is family. And it was incredible. So I was like, okay, I wish that was, if we're going to go ridiculous, let's go as ridiculous as possible. And the only person who was down with going as ridiculous as possible was Jason Momoa. And that just made me like love his performance so much more.
I guess at this point, death doesn't mean anything in this franchise. I mean, I won't spoil anything, but multiple deaths have been retconned, at least from what I've picked up on. Death doesn't mean anything. There's something that happens at the end of the film where it's like, I wonder how big of a toll that's really going to have. And gravity means nothing. They literally drop a car out of a plane. It hits the ground, bounces, and keeps driving. There's no physics. There's no stakes. There's no lot. Jason Momoa and those performances, they're embracing that. They get how silly this is. And yet, probably ultimately, the struggle in there is that the film needs to commit. There's still some memory of this being a gritty racing film from 2001. It's been 20 years. Times have changed. This franchise has changed, and they just need to commit.
That's part of why I'm so excited to go back and watch these from the beginning, because I think starting on this one and then going to the first one, the contrast is going to be so hilarious. Like at this point, they're basically all like Marvel superheroes at this point, where I would not be surprised if later on they're just like, and Vin can fly. Don't worry about it. By the time they get to whatever the third and the finale of this is, they'll be like, He's bulletproof and he can fly and he has telekinesis or something. Like they'll just give him
Mm-hmm.
full like X-Men powers because that's basically where we're going with this at this point. And everyone also has all the tech too. So it's this combination of like James Bond immediate
Mm-hmm.
like get you out of any crunch tech and just being straight up a superhero that's invincible. And I like love that because it's so dumb but in the funnest way. There was a bunch of times during this where I kept thinking of, because you know I love like big trashy like Indian action movies or gigantic things, even things that are just like those. To me those movies really embrace the fun of the ridiculousness. I kept getting such flashbacks of Patan, which was one that I loved. This movie Saho that's like, you know, in no way a good movie, but it's a complete guilty pleasure movie for me because you're like, there's no part of this that makes any sense, but we're just doing these insane action sequences, and they're insane to the level where you kind of are like, it was this edited weird, or like what happened? Where is the logic in this? Weren't they just over there? And it's like this became that in a way that I was like, okay, that I can be on board for. The entire sequence with the like Jason Momoa has the bomb thing in Rome, and it's like a giant like Indiana Jones boulder like rolling
Yes.
through the streets of Rome and stuff, and it's like rolling down the Spanish Steps and stuff like that. And then he's like controlling it from afar, but you're like, where is he where he's seeing this? Because he's like in some tower, but you're like, how many miles away is he? What is going on?
Is
And he's like,
Rome this small?
yeah, you're like, what is how where is he perched that he can see all of this unfolding with perfect clarity to the point where he can literally see like Michelle Rodriguez on a motorcycle dodging the bomb in like narrow streets. And you're just like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's one of those movies where you just go, how is any of this? And then you have to remind yourself, no, it doesn't matter. None of this matters. He's whatever. He's got a bomb. He's rolling it through the streets of Rome and he's gleefully enjoying it and like listening to music at the same time. It doesn't
And
matter. It's not important.
and his glee carries it.
Yes.
And there are plenty of moments where I just found myself going, of course it does. You know, they're doing this, of course.
Yes.
And that's suspension of disbelief. These are big budget popcorn, close as we can get now to 1980s action.
Totally.
There's no reality. Reality means nothing.
Yes.
And it's that Rome sequence typifies it there. They're, he's watching everybody. He's they're blowing up cars. There's one character that's in there and then just disappears from the whole movie. Is he dead? We don't know. It's
so true.
But
people
by golly, I had
out
fun with it
in the weirdest ways. People just show up and go, and I'm here now. And it's like, where did they come from? What are they doing? It doesn't matter. It's not important. And then they're
Cameo,
like,
the movie.
Yeah, they're like, I've done my couple days on set, gotta go. And then they just leave, and you're like, where?
I'll be back for the second film.
Yeah, totally. They're like, I'll see you in part 2 of this potentially 3-part finale.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
So insane. It just keeps getting so crazy. And that's the thing, like when it embraces that, it's so great. And Momoa is doing that all the time. He is leaning into the silliness of it. There's like a moment in this, and it's not really a big spoiler because I mean there's not really spoilers in this, but there's a moment where Momoa has Dom's son, and I was laughing so hard. He kidnaps a child. He's got this child with him in the car, and he goes to this kid who's like 8, and he goes, "Hey, do you party?" And I'm like, this is incredible. I'm like, is he asking like a 4th grader, "Do you party?" This is magnificent. Like, what is this? And that's where I was just
Jason Momoa playing Jason Momoa.
Totally. That's where I was like, they're letting Momoa just be Momoa, and that is the best choice that this franchise could possibly make. So I was 100% on board for that. He's so crazy, and it's such a weird performance. He's so flamboyant. He's just like, there's just such a joy in everything that he's doing. And I want that. That's what I want this to be. I wish Vin was doing that.
It's one of the better villain it, like you said, it rivals Jack Nicholson and Heath Ledger's Jokers. terrifying, but you laugh. You want to spend more time with this character because it's so flat in other places.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was doing, what direction he received, but more of that, please.
Yes. That's what I kept wondering too, was I was like, okay, were a bunch of the Momoa scenes shot like a different time for all this? Or did Vin just decide that he needs to be more serious? Like, where is the disconnect between these things? Because why are we letting Momoa just have a blast and Vin is over here being like, so not like dour, but like he's attempting to be very serious. And it's
he's
like
stoic.
Yeah, and it's like, did you not like get the memo of what your franchise is? Do you not know where we're at this point? And why, if you're going to do that, it just doesn't match in the weirdest way. And that was where the disconnect like felt strange to me. I could tell it was there, but because I was having so much fun with Momoa, I was like, I don't really care that Vin is kind of like the part that's dragging this down, because I'm having so much fun with the insane Momoa stuff.
Momoa's stealing the movie from you, bro. Momoa's stealing the movie.
Big time. The real heist of this movie is Jason Momoa stealing the entire thing and making me wish that there was a spin-off that was just his character, wreaking havoc on the family.
That's the villain. I usually whine about those villain or the Penguin. Oh, let's Sinister Six. Let's put the villain in. I would watch that one. That is what I would watch.
I'm like, there could be potential in this. We end the Fast franchise. We just do this like spin-off series that's like the Jason Momoa Chronicles of like things that his character did before and other dastardly deeds. Because I would watch that any day of the week. That could even be like a series if they wanted to make it like a TV series.
Jason Momoa is Dante doing like an Ocean's 11 kind of skipping through Europe, just wreaking havoc, stealing things. Perfect.
Stealing
Take it, Hollywood,
things,
please.
shit talking, just like being insanely flamboyant and having a blast. And I'm on board for that. That entire sequence in Brazil where they do the race, which felt like, why is this even in this movie? It adds literally nothing, but it adds a lot of weird Momoa performance stuff. So I was like, well, in that case, I'm glad it's in the movie.
It adds weird Momoa stuff. It seems like that's literally in the movie for that one character, which I suppose means something to people who saw,
I guess,
number 6. I'm like, who is this chick? Somebody had to explain it to me later that, oh, this means this, which, is.
Yeah. I'm just like, I don't know why she's here. I don't know what this is, but we get a fun sequence where Momoa has like pigtails and is like racing Vin Diesel and like shit talking, and somehow they're all in cars driving and talking at a normal volume, but they can all hear each other.
It's that Marvel ear. At this point, we just have to assume everybody in an action film is wearing a mic'd up earpiece, that
Totally.
we're all on comms.
Exactly. There's no explanation for it, but it's fine. They can all hear each other. They're literally racing down the street in cars and somehow turning to talk shit to each other in like normal speaking volume. And we're completely able to hear it and don't worry about it. And it's like, all right.
See, I worry diving into how much fun I had with this and the associations that I have with this franchise now. I worry about diving into the first half when this, because I've said already here, I didn't like this movie when it took itself seriously. And that's what it sounds like at least 1, 2, and 3 do. It's this, but on a much smaller scale, on a much serious scale. And that's, to be honest, one of the reasons why I never ventured into this series. It's just that part of it never interested me.
Yeah, I'm more here for like the turned up to 11 insanity. And it is going to be
5
weird.
and later, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we do it in reverse order or something where we just go backwards, because we'll slowly like ease ourselves into when these were sort of small movies. We'll start with like the $300 million ones and then just work our way back to a reasonably budgeted action film. But yeah, I agree. It's funny. Like I don't know much about it, but I remember like basically all these people that I know that are talking about it are like, remember when they were like stealing DVD players and stuff, and now they're like international spies that work for the agency, which that cracked me up too, that it's basically Shield, but they couldn't come up with like a name like Shield. They were like, we don't even want to make an acronym, just call it the agency. It's such a first draft idea. What is this spy agency called? I don't know, just write down the agency, we'll figure it out later. And then it's just
and then
it's
they
just
forgot.
the agency. Yeah.
I mean, one of our critics here called it the first film Point Break with cars.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of gives you an image of how small and I mean, Paul Walker we hadn't heard of Vin Diesel at that point, really. At least I hadn't. And Paul Walker was the lead. Paul Walker was always the other guy. He was the good looking, but he was the pretty boy. He was the jerk. He was the lead this time out. So that kind of tells you where this was coming from. This was a C-list film in 2001, ye olden days,
and now it's just like straight up the Avengers.
Yeah.
It's the Avengers with cars, and it's like, okay, I'm really curious to see the evolution of this and how this has grown from that to this gigantic franchise that it is now. The evolution of those things is always so interesting to me whenever you have an enormous, like, I feel like even with Marvel, it started out pretty big. Even though Iron Man is nowhere near as big as like Infinity War, it's still a really big movie. And they like, it's a superhero movie. We get it. People are invincible. People can do all sorts of things. I'm going to be really interested to see how some small scale kind of thieves and heists and stuff turns into international spies and explosions. And now we have to literally save the world. And cars are in space, apparently, in one of them. And I can't wait for that.
The mind boggles where this franchise will go by the end of however long this 3-part finale. Or if I suppose they could keep it going if I recast the kid, but Vin Diesel's got to slow down at some point.
That's the thing too. This to me is so funny. Red Letter Media refers to these like vanity project things as black tank top movies, because there was a whole series of these that they watched that was basically like the guy is writer, director, producer, star, and there's always a scene of him in like a tight black tank top, like romancing some lady or beating up a guy or something. And so it's the classic black tank top vanity project kind of movie. And that is like, this is that, but like to the most. This is Vin's ultimate black tank top magnum opus. And I feel like he'll never let this go. So it's like, if there is room for this to become 7 more movies, or become something where now we're doing the young Fast and the Furious, or we're doing some sort of spin-off, I just don't see there being a way that Vin, with his sleeveless whatever he's got going on, doesn't just show up, just looking like an egg with CG smeared over him to make him look all smooth, and just show up and be like, family. And then that's even just as a cameo in something. Because this is such his franchise. This is his black tank top vanity project. And I feel like it just always will be that until he's ready to call it quits, which may never happen.
I mean, there is an infinite number of spin-off possibilities here, and I'm surprised we haven't seen more beyond Hobbs and Shaw. I mean, they seem to be going the opposite direction and taking all of the figures who could have their spin-offs and just bringing them back in. So, I mean, we figure out, if we want to go into total spoilers, the cut scene at the end, there's, that person who, we just figured, hey, okay, so hell really has frozen over, and it's all back. They're all in the same movie. They're doing, I guess this is Avengers Endgame, Fast and the Furious style. We're going to take everybody and just jam them together and see what happens.
Totally. Yeah, that post-credits, mid-credits situation, I was laughing out loud during that, just because from what I know, and again, not having seen these movies, all I know is the beef and the drama. And so
the tea exactly.
Exactly. So when that happened, I just in my brain, I was like, this is truly amazing. And I thought like, well, the hierarchy of some people's careers has certainly changed.
That's
And
a whole episode in itself.
I was living for that. I was like, okay, this is either brilliant in that we've all fallen for it, or this is a tail between the legs situation that is also delightful. So I was like, okay, this is great. I'm on board for that. I mean, I think I will totally see more of these. I'll see the previous ones, but I will also
Yeah.
see if this is a finale trilogy. I'll see it. I don't necessarily think, I mean, everybody that I know that loves this franchise is like, oh, this is the worst one. Oh, this really takes all the fun out of the franchise. The only thing that's great about it is Momoa. But
Really?
having no
Okay.
experience with the franchise, like, I'm curious to see, like, are these all of the same quality? Because I think sometimes we get this, like, oh, this one's really good and this one's really bad and blah, blah, as we are in it. But I wonder if, like, after, 5, do they just become big, dumb action movies to the point where they are kind of all the same? It's just what level of ridiculous we're willing to tolerate that changes. Or is there an actual notable difference in quality between this one and previous ones, or the future potentially 2 more that we may get? So I will definitely see the next, possibly 2, because I'm on board. Now I want to know where this is going, and if we can hang on to Momoa and have some Momoa stuff going on, I'm on board for that. So I would be down for more of this.
Speaking of somebody who Momoa, is he going back to, he's not going back to Aquaman. I've heard he might go back to DC as another character, but his schedule opened up too because of the whole DC changeover. So I will definitely come back. Momoa's performance even alone I'll finish up this series. I mean, to rep for some of our, local film critics groups, people, I know a lot of the comments I've heard have said this was actually a nice change of pace from the last couple, that there's been some of this going on in, some wavering in the 5, like 5 and 6 were good, or maybe 7, 8, 9 were maybe not as good, that this kind of jumps back into what they loved about the previous. I'd have to go back and see for myself. I've heard a lot of things that the previous films maybe took themselves a little more seriously, and that there was some more love for this one, which I don't necessarily, not having seen it, of course, I don't necessarily know if I would be on, that this was awful, that this had a lot of good stuff. And that Momoa performance alone was enough for me to go, if he's still the villain, I'll be back. I'll finish this up.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm intrigued.
Having no like previous experience with it, it felt very much like what I was expecting.
Yeah.
So maybe because I had no real expectations going in other than like, I'm going to see a big action movie, I was like, yep, that's what it is. It's a big action movie. But I think maybe for people who have this, like, who have been there for 20 years and who are really on board with this franchise, this was a letdown for them. But for me, I was like, yeah, this is what I thought it was going to be. Like, I thought it was going to be this, and it delivered what I thought it was going to be, and exceeded expectations in some areas with Momoa. And other than that, I was like, yeah, okay, this is about on par with what I would imagine these movies are.
It was a big dumb popcorn film, and that was what we got. And we were expecting that, and that happened, and it was perfect.
Exactly. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm not looking for more out of this. I'm not trying to have meaning or anything like that. I'm not trying to have, a commentary on society or something. Like, I'm trying to watch explosions and people punching each other and just dumb stuff happening. And this delivered on all those areas, especially with the villain. Like, a great performance from Momoa. And that was 100%. Like, I wish there was more of that in this movie. And maybe that'll be the note that they take when they do the future ones, is like, we just need more Momoa in this, because he's killing it. He's the best.
This will never be in the running for a best screenplay Oscar. This is not an Oscar picture, but they don't all have to be. It's perfectly fine to go to, I'm perfectly fine with going to a movie just to enjoy myself.
Totally.
I grew up on Mystery Science Theater 3000. There's a place for the dumb, there's a place for the weird, there's a place for film going to just be an enjoyable experience that you don't have to think through. They shouldn't all be like that. We do need characters and growth and script. This didn't necessarily have all that, but it leaned into it. Is if a movie does not think itself more than it is and is willing to lean into the crazy, do it. Embrace the crazy. I'm fine with that.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see where this franchise goes and how it evolves. Yes. And if I think I'm pretty sure this is making money, so I think we will see more.
Yeah, from what I heard.
Yeah, so it's like, I'm on board. I'm ready to see where this goes, and I'm ready to go back and explore the origins of where this all started and came from.
Here.
Well, I feel like we've covered Fast 10. We've covered this thing. We'll go back and we'll do another episode as we go through and watch this franchise. We may do some check-ins over the next little while of, okay, we watched the first 3. Here's what we think. Okay, we watched the next couple. Here's what we think. And just see how far we get in this. But yeah, I feel like we've established this is big and dumb and stupid, and Momoa is really just the goat of this whole thing. Yes, so good.
He is the goat.
Absolutely. Well, I think that about does it. So yes, if you enjoyed this episode, like, comment, subscribe, share, follow us on the socials, all the things. Our reviews will be linked in the description, and we hope that you will join us for the next episode. Thank you so much for watching.